Welcome to Khetz tutorials, and in this video I'll be doing question 31 from 1.5 exercises in geometry calculus. So we're asked to find the inverse and to describe how it is related to f. So this is our f, so it's our starting point. Remember, f of x is the same as y, and we're going to find the inverse of this. So we're going to square both sides just to eliminate the square root. And this is where we are. At this stage, we can now swap our x and y's. Remember, that's what you do when you find the inverse. So in place of y, I'm going to put an x. In place of x, I'm going to put a y. So that's what we have. Now, I'm going to make y the subject of the formula because that's how you generally write or describe a function. So to do that, I'm going to take this to the left-hand side. So the negative y squared will come to the left-hand side, and the x squared will come to the right-hand side. Then my y will be plus or minus. I'm going to find the square root of both sides. And now I have to decide what the correct sign would be. And for that, look at the domain of your original function. The domain of the original function now becomes the range of your inverse. So this is our inverse. And it now has to be between 0 and 1 in the y direction. And we can't get that because we got that from the domain. That domain now becomes the range. And we can't have values like this if we consider the negative. So it definitely has to be the positive one, which is just this. And with this, we're definitely going to get values which are between 0 and 1 on the y-axis. And if you look at this, it's exactly the same as where we started. So in other words, or to answer this question, first of all, we found the inverse, so we're done with that part. And the question then asks, how is it related to f? Well, you can say they're identical or they're the same. And the second one says, identify the graph of f and explain your answer to part A. So this is a, let me just quickly sketch this. This is part of a parabola, which looks like this. Right? But remember that we've been restricted. It only goes from 0 to 1. And it doesn't have the negative parts that parabolas usually have of this form because the function doesn't have a negative in front of it. It's not possible to have a negative from the square root sign. So that's why it just goes from there to there. And furthermore, it has been restricted to only exist between 0 and x of 0 and then x of 1, which means it only goes from the origin at 0 to some point there at 1. So it's not even all of it, it's just that part there, right? And now, if you find the inverse of this, remember the inverse, you're swapping x and y. And when you swap your x's and your y's here, the result will just fall exactly on it. And we can also use the domain and the range to figure that out. So with this, our domain and range, the original, so f has a domain of that, as you can see, that's the domains between 0 and 1. And that also applies to your y. Just so it happens that the range is the exact same thing. And now when we come to the inverse, remember that the domain of the inverse is the range of the original. So we're just going to grab that. So it's going to be this. And the range would be the domain of the original. And it just so happens to be the exact same thing. Based on this, we could have concluded that they're exactly the same. They fall exactly on top of each other. Or you can figure that out also from the sketch. So using either of these methods, or even both if you want, that's how you'd prove Or that's how you'd give your explanation. You can also add some words if you like.